The idea of the Soham is very profound and deceptively simple. Simply put, it rides on the principle of profound relaxation. What is also referred to in the Yoga Tantras as Dzogchen, which means natural state. The idea is that the condition of enlightenment is spontaneously arising, inborn, without origination, without beginning. And that the structure of the human form, human consciousness, reflects the structure of the creation. They were assembled together. Oftentimes, when you read a yogic text, you'll run into this idea of consciousness in layers, going from coarse to increasingly refined and subtle. The idea of the human form in just basic yogic physiology is not so much having one body, but having 4 bodies that are aligned with each other and arise simultaneously. The thumbnail idea of organization is matter. One layer down, this idea of prana, an electrical charge of the life force, the kundalini, is in the subtle physical body. It is relative to the body and is the driving force of the physical body. It is actually one of the most complex of the 4 bodies. It has the dynamic of prana, shakti, which are fields of consciousness that are described by their motion. They are said to descend and ascend, to cycle, expand and contract, and pervade. These pranas have a relative formation that are called nadis, which are conceived of as flows of force inside the subtle physical body. The primary of which is called Sushumna, a subtle nerve that flows from the crown of the head to the base of the spine. It conducts the light of consciousness itself. It is said to be 100,000th width of a human hair. Also, the left and right channel of Ida and Pingala, the male and female, yin and yang frequency, are to the immediate left and right. These both run from the crown of the head to the base of the spine, and they are the arc, the lightning rod of the movement of the life force, the movement of the kundalini, the movement of consciousness inside being. There are said to be 76,000 nadis. These 3 are primary. Strung upon the Sushumna, Ida, and Pingala are the 6 wheels, the 6 chakras. The base of the spine, at the genital region, at the navel, at the heart, throat, forehead, and crown. And each one of these is said to be like a lotus. Everybody has seen the drawings where there are lotuses and different numbered petals. At the base of the spine there are 4 petals. In the genital region there are 6. The navel there are 10. The heart 12. The throat 16, and at the forehead 2. Crown of the head there are said to be 1,000. All of the fibers of consciousness bundle at the crown of the head and flow into the space over the crown of the head. But it's important to get a hold of this idea of these 6 wheels with the 50 petals, each petal being the anchor of a stream of consciousness that suspended on the 3 rivers of Ida, Pingala, and Sushumna. Sushumna being the central nerve, Ida being the feminine flow, Pingala being the masculine flow, on the right and left side of the body. They are like an inverted tree. And they flow from the seats along the spine through the pattern that very much supports the physical body. But what's important to understand is they all terminate in the brain. There are 6 wheels on the spinal cord, and the brain has 6 seats of spiritual activity. Each one of these wheels has a direct connection with the awakening of the brain mass. Now, the idea of the Soham is the idea of this relaxation of consciousness and the movement of this consciousness through the 4 bodies. So we have the physical body of matter, the subtle physical body of electricity. The third body is the causal body. It is the body of mind, mental formation. There are thousands of levels of mental formation, countless. But the first 3 that are the ones that we're the most familiar with are the reflexes that conduct your identity, your personal individual identity. That's like the anchor, which would be the ego reflex of individual identity or separation. The intellect, which is a kind of list-making capacity, drawing the information from the senses and processing that information into meaningful formation. It is the servant to the ego. The idea of the reflexive separation of the ego, I am, and the intellect would fill in the blank. I am a man, a woman. My name is John. My name is Sarah. And all the list-making capacity of, well, when you think of when somebody says, hello, how are you? And there's a list of qualities that are how you are. Oh, what do you do? And there's another list. List after list. This is the intellect reflex. The third capacity would be memory, which is, of course, the servant of the intellect. It is one of the funny things is that when we see something, we immediately compare it to something we've already seen. When we hear something, we compare it to something we've already heard. And thus, in a funny way, the way we're structured at the lowest level of the individual idea of self is one of the past always affecting the present. What we have been affects what we are now. And so we're always kind of trailing behind in a chain of list-making associations that what we've been defines what we are and thus defines what we are going to be. The fourth body would be the supraconscious. The fourth body is what we call Atman. It takes the form of an atom, deep in self. It looks like a scintillating blue pearl, a blue atom. This atom is of the fabric of the substructure of consciousness. So what we see is we have the material appearance, we have the electrical charge of the excitation of particles that drives and moves the creation in all its constant transformation. But we understand from basic physics that energy is never lost or gained, it simply changes form. This is what's happening in the subtle body. And it is that part of the creation that correlates to the subtle body. The dynamic of formless consciousness and the surface of that consciousness being reflected in its individual self-identity is reflected in the third body. And the fourth body, the substrata, that consciousness without formation, that is a doorway to the ocean. And this is just a basic general idea of the conception of a human form in the Yoga Tantra. The word Tantra means loom. The idea of Tantra is like a loom, where if you've ever woven a piece of fabric, or if you lived with a grandmother that wove carpets, like I did, you know what a loom is, and you have a warp and a woof. You have countless threads, and you go along and you tie different pattern knots, different colors, rack it down, and then you do it again and again, and you can make any pattern on the warp and woof of the loom. That's what the idea of the Yoga Tantra is. The Tantras are like maps, are like diagrams. And there's not just one, there's thousands. But when you think about the warp and woof, the warp fabric is this fundamental structure of the human form. And that structure rests on these four basic bodies: the physical body of matter, the subtle physical body of the kundalini, electricity, life force, the causal body of mental formation. Now, the mental formation is again countless. I reference the idea of ego, intellect, and memory because everybody has an immediate experience of that. But the quality of mind goes on forever without end. It was never originated and it does not end. It is again annotated by its behavior, how it operates, how the particles of consciousness are operating. When you talk with somebody that is involved in spiritual study, you talk about planes of consciousness. What they're referring to is levels of mind, levels of attention, where the fabric of consciousness, the warp and woof of consciousness, operates different. At this frequency, it operates like this. We feel it and experience it in a certain way. And as we bring ourselves into alignment with those states, it affects us, just like when we are in the waking state. We all agree that the sky is blue. We agree on the firmness of the earth. It's hot, it's cold. But when we go from the waking state to the dream state, in the waking state, that's a shared state. Everybody plugs in and we agree with that state. But the dream state, sleep with dream state, we go home, we lay down, we go to sleep, and we change planes of consciousness. This is something everybody does in every 24-hour cycle. If they don't, they start to go out of whack, out of balance. But what you're really doing is you're changing planes of consciousness where consciousness is operating in a different way. And in a dream state, it's not a shared state, it's an individual state. It operates inside the electrical charge of the individual. We can all be sitting out here and a person can go in the next room and lie down and dream that they're walking across a field and they see a tiger. And we would be sharing the same space. They could even be curled up on the floor next to us. We'd all be in the same room, but we in different states of consciousness. We would never see that person's dream. And we could be sitting here and they wouldn't know what we were doing, even though we were in the same room. This is what planes of consciousness do, and because it's what consciousness is so subtle, it's always folding over on itself in different planes of consciousness. We all know of the waking state and the dream state. Everybody experiences it. But there's also the deep sleep state. What occurs in the deep sleep state? We go to another plane of consciousness where the mind thinks about nothing at all. It's not like it's gone, it just thinks about nothing. It's like when the mind is completely downloads, whatever it's gone through, refreshes itself, reboots, if you will. And then, what does it do? It comes back through the sleep with dream state, back into the waking state. Oh, I had such a great rest. And you go off to your busy day. And people are always changing planes of consciousness all the time, they think. You know, most of the time they think, well, planes of consciousness, that sounds pretty far out. But that's what's happening when you go from the waking to the dream to the deep sleep. Consciousness is just behaving in a different way. It's the way time and space assembles itself, and those are three planes. But there are, of course, countless planes past that. Countless planes where you can train yourself, and this is what basically yogis are doing, is that they are moving their attention through the fabric of the four bodies: the physical body, subtle physical body, causal body. And most importantly, They're starting to get in touch with that fourth body. It's there, it's hardwired. It's not somebody's imagination, somebody didn't dream it up, it's just there. But it's interesting to note that the three states of consciousness that the entire world experiences are relative, just to say that they are transient. There is a quality of coming and going from the waking to the dream to the deep sleep and back. But the fourth state is the first state that is locked into the substrata of consciousness itself. It is the particle of the support of everything. And so it is said to pervade the other three states. And that's what I mean. I want to use that word pervade again, because that's one of the ideas of what consciousness does. What does it do? It pervades. It descends and ascends. We feel that the consciousness sink and arise. We feel it spin. We feel it expand and contract. We also feel it pervade. It soaks in. Just like if you make yourself a cup of tea and you have loose leaf tea and you pour the tea in with the water. And what does the tea do at first? It sits on the top. But as the water begins to pervade the tea, what does it do? It begins to sink. The more soaked into the water the tea leaves become, the more pervaded they are, the stronger the tea. When all the tea is at the bottom of the cup, that's when the tea is the strongest. And that's what this fourth state is about, this idea of this consciousness with the atom of consciousness, the blue pearl. It's in there, and that it's pervading your waking state. It's pervading your sleep with dream state. It's pervading all of your mental states. But because it's so subtle, and because of the fabric of the movement, the dynamic of the movement of the senses as the operation of the intellect occurs, and as the senses are processed, that produces a lot of turbulence in the mind as we have to generate all of this information to hold our identity in place, all of the dynamics of the ego sense, all of the processing of that information of the intellect, all of that reconciling our experiences with our memory core. Because remember, every time we see something, it's not like we're seeing it for the first time. What we're really seeing is our memory of seeing something before that was kind of like it. If you watch yourself, every time you see something, there's this energy called pattern recognition, where you immediately compare it to 500,000 things in 1 second. And then you make a decision. Oh, that's that. You know, it's a rope. No, it's a snake. No, it's a rope. The mind is so churned, it's so agitated by all of this activity. Well, it's just like rain on a pond, to use the classic Zen metaphor. The mind is empty. It has no quality. It reflects what it comes into contact with. And so the senses are hardwired into the brain. Then all of that processing is hardwired. Then all the structure of identity. Of course, if we move our identity through the social structure, what Freud and Lacan and Jung are talking about, how we're always at war with our identity, and our identity is cut up in consciousness and subconscious and deep consciousness, and all these levels of consciousness are in conflict with each other. It's a lot of mental activity. And that's like the water of the lake constantly being churned. You can't see into the depths. You want to still the waters of the mind through the disciplines of the Yoga Tantra. And those basic disciplines are very fundamental. They start with the idea of the breath, the soham. It's called the pranayama. And then you have the reflexes of mental training, the ability to concentrate. The idea of concentration is the idea of being able to bring the entire mind to bear on a single point, excluding all other points. To be able to concentrate on something well, a person that is a meditation teacher would say you should be able to concentrate on a single subject without the slightest flicker of attention for at least 3 hours. When you can do that, you've got some concentration power. The reverse of concentration is meditation, the ability to think of everything at once. In other words, open the mind completely and allow consciousness to completely unfold and include everything. And the third idea behind mental training is discrimination. And discrimination, it has everything to do with this ability to discern, because it's a reflex of discernment. It's a quality of attention where you can notice the difference of being at the level of the physical body. You feel the body, it's cold, it's hot, it's hungry. And all of the idea of identity you have wrapped up in the body, and everybody's familiar with that. And then being able to discern the difference of the physical body and just swap down another frequency and you're in the subtle physical body. The physical body drops away and you're only feeling the dynamic of the life force. You're only feeling the force of the Kundalini, which is spread throughout the entire formation, but concentrated very intensely at the base of the spine, at the crown of the head. And it conducts itself very intensely along the channel of the Sushumna, Ida, and Pingala, and opens all of these wheels. And as they move up and down Sushumna, Ida, and Pingala, it activates the various chakras and wheels. As the wheels become activated, these wires, these fibers, the 4 from the base of the spine, the 6 from the second chakra, the navel, the heart, all become filled with energy. And as they do so, they move throughout all of the extremities and go up the spine and activate the brain. And as that occurs, as the Kundalini gets stronger and stronger, first it starts sporadically, then it starts to burn hotter and hotter. It's very much like a fire that starts slow, it rides on the surface of the fuel, but as it gets hotter, what does it do? It infuses into the fuel. The hottest part of the fire is when the fire has completely invested the fuel. And that's what the dynamic of the Kundalini is like inside the Ida, Pingala, and Sushumna, and the physical body, the mind, and the fourth body. The idea of conducting the Soham throughout this assembly is again very simple. It's deceptively simple. On the surface we have the physical body. But as you begin to conduct the Soham inside the bellows breath. Now the bellows breath is a yogic tactic. It's a control of the prana, the pranayama. The inward breath, expanding the diaphragm. The outward breath, compressing the diaphragm. Everyone do that just once. Put your hand on your diaphragm. And now, in the inward breath, expand the diaphragm and push the hand out. You find you have to train yourself to breathe in this way. You'll feel that it pushes out at the back, it presses against the kidneys, the entire back, and the nadis and nerves in the back open up. Now, squeeze the diaphragm. You feel that descending energy on the inward breath. It's conducting itself along those 3 rivers, from the crown of the head to the base of the spine. Now breathing out. And you feel this rising wave. Now what's very interesting is this is something that works because it's the way human beings are put together. The life force, the prana shakti, that is the force that gives your body the appearance of life. As long as the prana is present inside the system, you are alive. When the prana disappears from the system, the mind and the body separate and you have the death experience. At this time, at this place, the prana is connected to the breath. When you breathe in, the breath moves in. That's the exchange of gases. But you also feel it's this very profound vibration. It's associated with the breath. It's like a subtle throb. Because it's electrical, it's cumulative. I mean, what's the first idea of electricity? Electricity goes from a greater area of concentration to a lesser area of concentration. So this is where the idea of the Soham becomes very powerful, very profound, and very simple. The movement of the breath is connected to the movement of the prana. Remember that the prana is a form of Kundalini. Just watch your attention when you control your breath. It's the first reflex of awakening, the pranayama, control and mastery of the breath. By watching the breath, your reflexive attention aligns with the breath. As you relax the body and conduct the movement of the prana with the form of the bellows, which, because of its nature, drives the breath from the crown of the head to the base of the spine in the in-breath, and then from the base of the spine back up to the crown of the head on the out-breath. There'll be times when the breath will spontaneously stop, sometimes on the in-breath, sometimes on the out-breath. And when it does so, it'll start amplifying. But what's important is look at the pathway of the breath, the prana, and the mind, and the body. This is where this idea of the soham arising with the natural state begins to really take on some meaning. By relaxing deeply into the in-breath, something very dramatic occurs. The prana descends with great force. It conducts itself along the central nerve and the left and right channel and begins to open all of these 6 wheels. As they open, they become energized. As they become energized, they send a pulse of energy out through the body, circulates through the subtle physical body, and ends up in the brain. In the outward breath, same thing. The prana rises with great force up and out. Again, conducting itself along the 3 rivers of Ida, Pingala, and Sushumna, striking each of these wheels. As it strikes each of the chakras, it sends a pulse of energy out through the fabric, swirls through the body. And when I say swirl, you'll see it ascending, expanding and contracting, cycling and infusing. So with each breath, you are pressing your attention very slowly and very subtly, but very firmly, deeper into self. The other idea that is really wonderful about this is that the way the mind operates is connected to the prana. The prana is connected to the breath. And so we begin to see, there's another connection down to the next body, the 3rd body. So we have the physical body, and we're conducting the pranayama and moving the prana and the attention. But we're also pressing the breath through the physical and subtle physical body. As the prana begins to move, the mind moves. So you'll notice that when the breath is in motion, the prana is in motion. And when the prana is in motion, the mind is in motion. This is a quality of attention that is both a part of meditation, concentration, and discrimination, because it's important for you to be able to feel the difference of consciousness, just like it's important for you to be able to go from the waking state into the sleep state consciously, go from the sleep state into the deep sleep state consciously, and then back. Not unconsciously, but consciously. In fact, everything that you do in your existence is going to happen one of 2 ways. It's either going to happen consciously, or it will happen unconsciously. The whole idea around the Yoga Tantra is pushing everything out of the unconscious column and into the conscious column. Everything that's happening inside your system, as it's happening, you're aware of it. You take 21,000 breaths a day, but how many of those breaths are conscious? 1, 2, 3? The masters of consciousness say, look, the entire vehicle, the entire structure, the elevator from the waking state and the physical body and the subtle physical body and the mental body is right there, and it's a fruit in your hand, and it's inside the structure of the breath. Not only that, you're already doing it 21,000 times a day. And so the point being, just make that process conscious. You're doing it unconsciously, make it conscious. And when you do that, an extraordinary thing takes place. Consciousness is an incredible force of attention. And by doing it consciously, it takes on a different form. It begins to be filled with what we call chaitanya, which is the scintillating light of consciousness. that is not something out there or even up there that descends upon you. It's inside you. It's already pervading your entire being. We would say that the anchor of this entire pervading being, an entire pervading wave of consciousness, is coming from beneath these three relative states. We have the physical state, the subtle physical state, and the causal state, the mental state. But underneath that, completely enshrouded in the phantasmagoria of all the activity of the transient conditions of the three upper states, and what the sages call the fourth state. We have the waking state, mind, body, senses, and life force in cooperation. We have the sleep with dream state. What happens in sleep with dream? We lose the body. We lose the senses. We just have the mind and the life force. It's operating at memory, but we're not aware of what's happening to our body when we're sleeping, nor are our senses operative. Go into deep sleep state, what happens? You drop the body, you drop the senses. The mind thinks of nothing, so you can cancel out the mind. It goes into a state of void consciousness, just empty. We spend X amount of time in the deep sleep state, then what happens? We slide back into the sleep with dream state. What begins? The mind kicks back in. And as we go from the sleep with dream back into the waking state, the senses and the body and the life force all kick back in. And you're going from one state to another. The whole idea, the entire thrust of this argument is that this is not new material. It's just happening unconsciously. So rather than make up a bunch of stuff that you have to imagine is there or think about it, and maybe or maybe not, you just start making that process conscious. This is the basic idea of meditation. This is the daily practice of sitting for an hour in meditation, conducting your life in a form of mindfulness, attentiveness, and learn to become conscious as you slide from one state to another. But the idea of the Soham really rests upon this idea of moving and integrating all four bodies. The idea of the breath moving from the physical, which is the physical breath, to the subtle physical, which is the prana component of the breath, to the pressure of intention, which is the mental capacity. But as the breath moves, the inward breath descends, the outward breath ascends. We're breathing in, we're breathing in, we're breathing in. The mind is in motion, the prana is in motion, the breath is in motion. We're breathing out, we're breathing out, we're breathing out. The breath is in motion, the prana is in motion, the mind is in motion. That leaves one vital point of contact, point of attention, and that is the space between the breaths. You're breathing in, you're breathing in, you're breathing in. There's a point when you are no longer breathing in, but you're not yet breathing out. And for your entire life, 21,000 breaths a day, you haven't for 1 second considered that space. The sages say, pay attention to this space, please. Press your attention there. Why? Because the mind is not moving. Think of this idea. We only see what we've already seen. Mind has a quality of momentum unto itself. But here we have an actual space inside the order of architecture itself, where the breath is not moving, the prana is not moving, and the mind is not moving. There's no momentum. It's like a hole in space and time. When you learn to press your attention there, you can move your attention from the physical body to the subtle physical body, to any place in the subtle physical body, any chakra, any current, any nadi, any drop, any bindu, because there's no momentum to hold it in space. You're breathing in, you're breathing in, you're breathing in. You're no longer breathing in, you're not yet breathing out. Press your attention into that empty space. Simple. It's so deceptively simple. It's a fruit in your hand. You're breathing out, you're breathing out, you're breathing out. But you're not yet breathing in. This takes place outside the body. The space between the breaths on the inside of the body is vastly different than the space between the breaths on the outside of the body. I think it's relative, because there are two spaces, and what do? They lead you to the place that I've been calling the fourth state. That place that is hardwired. It takes the form of a bindu, a blue scintillating atom called the blue pearl. Pervades all of the relative three states, but has been invisible because it has the effect of constantly churning your attention. By paying attention to the space between the breaths, you are looking into the calm space of the fabric of mind, the calm space of the fabric of the life force, the calm space of the support of the body. It's like a microscope where you can see into the substrata. I mean, it's just like when you look at this flower. You know it's beautiful. If you're thinking poetically, you think rhapsodically. If you're thinking artistically, you think of its beautiful shape. If you're thinking scientifically, you're thinking of the atomic structure. All of those things are unseen qualities, that they're present. And this is what the space between the breaths is about. It gets you down into the subtle fabric of your being. The vibration of the so, hum. It's a very profound mantra in that it balances the equilibrium of the infinite creation and the infinite consciousness. The syllable so vibrates with the creation. It's the material architecture of being. The syllable hum is the ocean of consciousness that is without form, without beginning. Now, if you think like a Westerner and you think, well, there was the Big Bang and then consciousness hurtled through space for 1 billion years and then it started to slowly cool and then galaxies formed and then solar systems and stars, etc., and then 50 million later there were the dinosaurs, and then another 50 million there were human beings, you're going to miss the point. It all happened at once. It's all simultaneous. Consciousness is a single thing. If you're looking at the surface of things, yeah, okay, it changed. If you look at the electrical charge of it, oh yeah, it changed. If you look at the fabric of mind, well, we see that subtle particles operate at different levels of consciousness. Just like we know that, well, the universe operates one way when we're waking, and it operates another way we're in our sleep with dream state. What's really going on there? Do we enter another universe? Or are we in the same universe, perceiving it from a different point of view? And that's the whole idea, and the vital idea, the point that must be grasped, as this idea of the fourth state. The particle of the fourth state, the Atman, is the substrata itself. It arose at once. Outside of time, outside of space. And the whole idea of what the masses of consciousness are doing when they're like Bodhidharma sitting and looking at a wall for 9 years, is they're soaking down through the strata. Getting off the surface, getting out of the ocean of electrical circuitry, getting out of the ocean of mind, getting into the dynamic of Atman. And the Atman is like into the ocean. It's not like that there's anything wrong with the creation or the fabric of the ocean of electrical prana or the mind. The point is, you have to also be aware of the fourth state. And that's what the Masters of Consciousness say. Include the fourth state. You have the tools to do it. You're already breathing 21,000 breaths a day. Become conscious of the fourth state at least once in all of those breaths. Just do it once. If you do it once, you'll be changed forever. There's a famous Zen idea that a Zen master once said that if you sit down and you follow the breath with the certainty that a slate held at the surface of the ocean and is dropped, flows from the surface down to the depths until it gets to the very bottom. If you can follow the breath without breaking for 7 days, you'll realize everything. That involves an incredibly courageous view, but it's been done. It took Bodhidharma 9 years, and everybody says he was the Buddha. So it takes 9 years. You're still doing good. It wasn't like he's contemplating vast equations of time and space. He's simply following consciousness through the structure. And he's not like trying to consider the entire universe at once, because he understood that this is that. Generate that understanding in this place, and all of that comes. It arises at the same time. It's one of those things, it's such a simple idea, everybody goes past it. Well, it's got to be harder than that. See, one of the things that happens when you sit and you just relax and open your mind, heart, and being, and start pressing into that empty space between the breaths, you feel this incredible gravity start to arise inside the physical body. Then you'll feel this gravity in the fabric of the electrical content of your life force. And then your mind will seem to have a gravitational force as it becomes more and more empty. You can feel the fabric of mind have a kind of gravitational integration to it that begins to eliminate all the detrital operations of sensory operations and memory-based operations, on and on and on, that keeps us bobbing on the surface. And as we sink deeper and deeper and deeper, there's a sense of just this incredible sense of relaxation, at the same time a kind of magnetic presence of just sheer gravity that begins to arise. It doesn't rise, it doesn't fall, it doesn't change. It just becomes deeper, without form, without cause, without beginning or end. And that's the awakening process. What I'm describing is a kind of a seed essence of countless diagrams of self. When we take the Tantra, the loom, and we can do one diagram and describe the creation and the integration of time and space in this diagram, and then we do another diagram, then we do another diagram. It arises in subtly different ways, but we always end up in the same place. But there have been so many beings that have taken this road. And they each have a tale to tell. And the way we are put together, each one of us, are as unique as stars. But how it came together arises out of that central throb of creation. There's been no time or space from the standpoint of consciousness. From the standpoint of consciousness, if you talk to a non-dualist, there's a philosophy called formlessness in yoga, where any dynamic is said to be just a ripple, and that just go deeper, neti, neti. Everything is transitory. If there's any occurrence to it, it's a transient event, discard it. And these are really hardcore guys. This formlessness idea is also very powerful. You know, my guru's guru, Nityananda, everybody has heard of Nityananda. He wasn't big on vast teachings. What did he do? He just hung around in that deep formless space connected to infinite consciousness. Everything you just experienced it by being around him. It didn't take words, it didn't take discussions, it didn't take description. He was so there. You just got anywhere close to him and you had that experience. That's how we all are. He's like way out there, and we're all shooting for that. Being in that incredible deep space of unbroken union. But how we get there is settling into that deep pocket of emptiness, of pure consciousness that appears spontaneously bubbling inside each and every one of us with the cycle of each breath. One breath creates the universe, the other breath dissolves it, and the space in between From the standpoint of the space everything, nothing has ever taken place. Consciousness is still consciousness. Consciousness would not recognize that it had gone through any change at any time. This is the idea of retreat. Today, this is the opening gesture of the New Year's retreat in Hard Light. Essentially, it gives us an opportunity to sit in meditation and fall into the ocean of consciousness with the steadiness of that slate for 2 days. Tomorrow we'll start at noon and we'll end at midnight. We'll cross over into the new year, recognizing the deep fabric of consciousness. And then on the new year we will celebrate with clearing obstacles and a very powerful Guru Yoga session. Which are all just very powerful vehicles of consciousness. What I'd like to do when we're doing this kind of sit is start with what I call a clearing of obstacles. There is a force to the retreat as it approaches in time and space, and as the people that are coming and people that are thinking about coming, there is an enormous explosion of consciousness inside their lives. And I've noticed that it's always useful to generate a meditation called clearing of obstacles, where you generate a connection to the retreat the day before the retreat starts, or 2 days before the retreat starts. That eliminates the karmic obstructions between a person and the body of the retreat. It is essentially a seed of the retreat that is expressed in that opening session. The idea of the Soham and the rising and falling of the breath aligned with the syllable So and Hum and the space between the breaths, and how the architecture of the human form connects with the architecture of the creation. There are very powerful ideas connected to the vast sweep of time that is the universe of universes, the ocean of universes of the physical body, and the point of consciousness that never changes of the fourth state. And it's possible to regulate those two, generate the entire energy of the universe and bring it to a single point within yourself, and see that that point within yourself and the point of the creation are the same. This is essentially what the state of consciousness called samadhi is, wherein consciousness goes to its deepest reflex. It's an operation of intuition that's indescribable. This idea of the natural state in connection with the breath and the unfoldment of consciousness, the space between the breaths, connecting the physical envelope of being, the body, the subtle physical envelope of being, the subtle physical body, the mental envelope of being, the causal body, and the fourth state, the supraconscious envelope of being, supraconsciousness, consciousness before consciousness. The idea of using the vehicle of the breath and the dynamic of the space between the breaths. And the fabric and the architecture of the physical body, which is actually 4 layers of being, each layer operating at a different plane of consciousness. When we first begin, when we go from the physical state to the subtle physical state, apprehension is so different, it's as if you travel from here to Mars. When you are inside the subtle physical body, you see everything as energy. And the divisions of elemental basis, and that very much is organized by how much of the brain is illuminated by the wheels on the spinal cord. In the spiritual life, the brain is everything. The brain and the ganglion, just like in physical life. The dynamic of the mental body, and finally the fourth state, the subtle physical body, the supramental body. by the conscious handling of the Soham, you can press your attention through. It's important to generate that application of attention, otherwise you'll tend to just bob on the surface. The use of the bellows breath and the relaxation of body, speech, and mind are the ticket. What I'd like to do now is meditate with you in this way, clearing obstacles and connecting the physical to the subtle physical, to the causal to the supracausal, so they all arise at once. We'll begin. One of the reasons the Soham gives rise to the natural state is that it rests inside the spontaneously arising consciousness that arises simultaneously as being and as the creation. The quality of deep relaxation is a very profound form of not doing, wherein things such as they are begin to spontaneously manifest. And as that occurs, all four envelopes, layers of being from the physical and subtle physical and causal and supracausal, begin to draw together through a kind of force of integration that is oftentimes referred to and feels like gravity. It is cumulative. You simply stay in that state in an unbroken condition. Learn to traverse the states of consciousness consciously. And a very unusual experience occurs, a kind of waking up begins to happen. And it is a very unusual experience, dramatic and very powerful. It's like waking up inside a dream. And you begin to experience the interconnectedness of everything within yourself as yourself. The dynamic of intention and the principle of awakening, which arises spontaneously within all beings, needing just a push, just a spark of recognition to set it in motion. Om Swaha.